Everybody, welcome back to Bleeding Cool's weekly recap of Fear the Walking Dead. We're taking a look at the third episode of the fourth season, Good Out Here. Let me just begin right from saying we're going to be hitting spoilers right from the very start. So if you're thinking it's one of those reviews where I'm not going to spoil things, this is one of those reviews where I'm going to spoil things because I think I kind of have to, because I think it gets to the heart of a very mixed episode. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, cool. I want to own up by saying, from a completely egotistical, narcissistic standpoint, I think I kind of have some kind of superpower when it comes to The Walking Dead and its franchises. Because in The Walking Dead, so far, every character I've wanted to die has died. Again, I didn't want Abraham to die. Glenn, since I kind of knew going in, plus they were kind of giving him his like Jesus-like status, so I was, at that point. But the dude with the RV, who I just so don't like, I can't even force myself to remember his name. Andrea, Lori, even Carl at that point, though I did feel a little bad, but yeah. So it was weird because I was watching the episode yesterday, and I said to my friend, I said, you know what? This person is the reason why I really, really, really stopped watching the show in the very beginning. I hope something happens to him. I think I even put it out in the live blog. I was like, I hope something happens to him. I hope he's gotten rid of, because he seems to be a really big problem in the show. Well, yeah, spoiler alert, they killed Nick. And I, even as a returning viewer, knowing about the show and everything else going into it, know what a big shock that was. And I have to give the creative forces behind the Fear the Walking Dead a lot of credit, because they were so subtly and consistently selling us on this idea that Morgan and Nick were going to be this like father and son, namaste, zen, get everybody on the same page type relationship. And it really seemed like it was going there last night. And then, bang, Morgan's words about how things will not turn out the way you think they're going to happened, and it just kind of blew my mind. Let me pause for a second, get a little bit back to the episode, because in all fairness, if I'm reviewing this episode, I'd have to say, except for that big shocking moment, I thought there were some nice moments, but in all, I think it was a little resetter, per se, for the episode. I mean, for the season. We had the typical, look, from a comic book standpoint, it's the whole idea of when superheroes meet up and they don't know each other and then they fight before they start to work together. This was that episode. So I think there were some behaviors and actions and everything else that kind of get suspended. It was interesting. We had a nice juxtaposition between the now and the then. The now, though, I'm going to talk about in a second with regards to the side storyline that involved John, Althea, Luciana, Victor, and Lucia. That, in regards to the SWAT truck, we saw where everything was going yesterday. Althea made a move to get the truck back. Nick ends up screwing up, as he does a lot in this episode, and for what people were telling me online, has done a lot throughout the series. Again, the reason why I stopped watching it in the first place. It just seemed like a really big, just like, okay, we're gonna work together, we're gonna get to know one another, and then eventually we're gonna be on the same page, which is eventually what ended up happening. I think along the way, I think we saw some very interesting dynamics play out. We saw Luciana really, at least being asked by John Dory about why she left. Did she love Nick when she left him, and said, yeah, I left him, but it didn't mean I stopped loving him. I think we see great character development in Althea, and I want to say right now, Althea is one of my favorite new characters on any show I'm watching so far. The issues with her tapes, her want to get people's story, her understanding in her speech about the importance of people having their stories heard, even if it's just outside and in the moment, I thought was just really amazing. Again, I think it's an example that we saw some really great character dynamics coming into play. Seeing Victor looking at Althea and just not even being able to figure out, like, well, I don't even get who you are. Like, you clearly are badass and you have this big truck, and yet you're speaking in these, like, you almost seems almost a condescending to her way, like, okay, that's this fanciful talk. But it's interesting. I want to look to my notes here and make sure I get the demarcation right. I'm very curious to know what the tapes that say the Bog 17-24 are going to all be about. That looks very, very interesting. But the other thing we learn about is Lucia is just badass. I mean, it's just you can tell she's cut from exactly the same cloth as her mom. And again, it was just nice to see everybody work together. We're starting to see the dynamics come into play. But the main storyline had to do with Nick. and Morgan. And this idea then that we see them building up this mentorship, and this idea that while all this is going on, Nick, who's unconscious and out of it, is essentially part of a deal where Althea's like, look, I'm gonna let you guys go, help me get the truck back and everything else, but Morgan's gonna stay here with Nick just to make sure everything's on the up and up. It's an episode-long negotiation of people getting to trust one another. With Morgan and Nick, we have the return of the Vultures. We see, as we saw in the sneak preview episode, where Morgan basically dives in to try and hide himself and Nick from being seen. Nick sees the car, and that just sets him off. And what sucks is he essentially just leaves Morgan there with a blaring horn to possibly die. Now, it's Morgan. We know he's super badass, and as he says, I don't die. But it's just again, it's that selfishness of Nick as we see him going after the car, and it's like, are you going to be that person still in this show who's just going to be more of a problem than anything else? Now, what's interesting is as this storyline's going on, we're getting a flashback to the then, and we see Nick getting rid of the crops and killing off everything that the Weevils have been destroying, and he decides to go with his mom Madison out on run. And when they go out there, they have a confrontation with Mel, who, I'm going to be honest with you, is now officially a bad guy, because the way he just kind of flicked the little prince back at Nick, I may not be Nick's biggest fan, but it's like, dude, really? For the little kid's book, that Luciana gave to Charlie the other episode, I thought that was a really, dick move on his part. And they go out scavenging, and they have a really great conversation where Nick talks about just feeling so just suffocated, but then he doesn't see the point in going out on these runs. And Madison saying to him, like, look, we go out on these runs because, it gives me hope, and not just stuff we need, but it gives me hope to see what the possibilities that are out there. And there's a moment we see in the flashback where they have a run-in with Ennis, Mel's brother from Vultures, and Charlie. And we see the deep hurt that Nick feels, the betrayal, but still feels like he can get Charlie back. And Ennis just basically saying to him, like, who the hell are you guys? We picked her up, we taught her to survive, everything else. And he establishes essentially what his parental figure is. Keep that in mind, because as we continue on for the then flashback, we see a beautiful moment where Madison stops and they find a field of blue bonnets, and it's just an amazing, beautiful scene. I need you to keep that in mind, because as we move forward in the now, Nick, there is something that went on, there is something that happened, because Nick is after Ennis big time, and he's got a hammer. Now, that's never ever a good thing. And of course, in the process of all this, Nick gets himself in trouble, as usual apparently, and almost gets himself eaten by his walkers. But of course, Morgan, badass stick in hand, takes care of the situation. Now, we also realize at this point that Nick has looked over Althea's video of Morgan and got some of Morgan's backstory, which Morgan doesn't really appreciate. And Morgan's just kind of getting the decision right now, like, okay, I'm done. I'm out of here. Peace. Done. I'm not going to deal with this. I'm going to roll. Nick, however, is going to be making sure he takes care of Ennis. And what's really, really interesting is that as all this is going on, we essentially see that Morgan ends up stumbling upon Ennis first and realizes he's the car, sees the guy, knows what's going on, and basically tries to tell the dude, look, you got to go. 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 Like, you can't stay here. You cannot stay here. And that's when we see that ominous scene where Nick's showing up with the hammer, and Morgan tries to stop him, but here's the problem. When you tell people you don't kill anymore, that's the one thing they're always going to hold against you. And Nick holds him on. It's like, look, in the end, what are you going to do to stop me from getting my revenge on this guy? You're not going to kill me. And that's when Morgan's just like, oh, my bad. I forgot why I don't want to connect with people, because this stuff always happens. I give the warning things aren't going to go well, and then 98% of the time I'm usually right. So Morgan's like, okay, beast, gotta go. I'm out. Do what you gotta do. Morgan starts walking off. Nick goes into the silo. We see a great scene where he swings his hammer, even going to commercial. They should have edited a little sooner because you could tell it was blocked. But we see this great fight that goes on between them. I didn't think Nick could even hold himself up for a fight for that long. But we see this great fight that goes on that ends up with Ennis being impaled on some antlers. And what's really screwed up about it, and what really gets the point across, is it's just not a matter of he fell on the antlers and died. It was the idea Nick just pushed him deeper down onto the antlers. And that's got you wondering, what the hell happened? What went on at the stadium between the then and the now that got Nick to this point? Because he just essentially just grated and shredded Ennis on those antlers. Morgan makes it back, but obviously too late. And that's when Morgan decides to open up to Nick. Morgan sees this opportunity of a human being, like, look, I gotta save you, dude. And he starts talking about why, what happened, what got him to this point, and shows him the art of peace and talks to him about a philosophy he was taught about to appreciate life that he's embracing again. And we see this great scene where Morgan in a distance is watching as Nick is reading over the books and coming to terms with things. And we see Nick in a moment of peace, and it's great because it's, as this is going on, we see the SWAT team truck arriving. They've gotten the truck back after an amazing instance of getting it out of there. Which again, Lucia, I gotta give Alicia. I'm sorry. I want to say Alicia, and it's coming out the wrong way, so I'm going to apologize. But we see Alicia doing some amazing stuff. In regards to making sure that truck is toured out and ready to go. So again, that just, it looks like everything is just good. It's like, okay, it's not the greatest episode. Nick keeps screwing up. Looks like he's going to get some sense of inner peace with Morgan. Everybody's on the same page, it looks like. So again, I'm ready to chalk this episode up as, okay, it's we'll see. It might be one of those bridging lead to episodes. And then we hear a gunshot go off. And we see Nick look down, and we see his blood, and we see that Charlie shot him. And goes back to what the flashback was talking about, the then segment, when he said, like, look, I'm the parent she knows. I'm the one who taught her to survive. I was the one who saved her. Well, I think that majorly came into play. And in that moment, I think a lot of the long-term fans thought, okay, we can do XYZ. No, they can't. There's nothing around where they're at. You knew at the moment where he got shot this was not going to last long. And they arrived back in time to essentially watch Nick bleed out and die. And one of the saddest and most touching moments is when Nick dies. You see him then wake up in the field of blue bonnets from the then. Which raises a ton of questions. Madison's there. Are we to interpret that? Would they have killed Madison? I guess that's the kind of thing I'm trying to wonder. Would they go that route? Where is she at? The fact that she's in this field of blue bonnets with Nick. Now, again, it could be just, the merging of things. I don't know. But I got to be honest with you. They did an excellent job in a total swerve on this one. No one saw this coming. No one saw this coming. You saw the social media reaction. It was like, wow. And I got to say, if you're Fear the Walking Dead and you've been saying all along that this is a great jumping on point, that we're just really going to be shaking stuff up and recreating this show, wow, so far. 2 really great episodes in a row. I thought this was a solid episode made up by the fact that we got to learn some more about the characters. The whole Nick thing, I think, just kind of pipe bombed it up a couple points just because of, wow, it really sets a tone of like, we're going to pretty much do anything in this show. And I have a lot of respect for that. So again, I would say a good solid episode of Fear the Walking Dead this week. Not the strongest episode. If I was giving it on a scale, I'd give it around a 6.5. Could go up higher if we see how this progresses on. I'm very curious to see how they react to Nick's death in the next episode. From what it looks like, it seems like there's going to be a lot of video interviewing going on, and I feel like we're going to be getting a lot of backstory on a lot of characters, even for stuff that may have happened well before the ending to Fear the Walking Dead Season 3. But guys, thank you for joining me. I know this one went a little longer, but yeah, I just was, my jaw was dropping when that took place, so I thought it was due a little bit more time and appreciation. But thank you guys for joining me. I really appreciate it. My name is Ray Flick. I'm television beat writer. I'll be back next Sunday for Fear the Walking Dead live blog as well as review and recap. But all this week, make sure you're checking out bleedingcool.com for some great coverage of comic books, television, film, video games, collectibles, social issues, anything and everything under the pop culture landscape that you can think should be covered. Most likely we're covering it. So please make sure you check us out on the inner tubes. And once again, guys, have a great start to your week. Enjoy.